Hi again, it's Keith from the Evangelical Free Church, Stony Stratford, and we're continuing in our series on the book of Ecclesiastes, and we've got to Ecclesiastes chapter 5. Now, as we've been noting, Ecclesiastes is a book of big questions, but Solomon seems to have found an answer to at least some of them. He's found a balance in life. He's said that work can be enjoyed, life can be enjoyed, companionship can be enjoyed, but he's also warned us about not making idols of those things. So in relation to that, he now turns to worship. If there are good things in life, and it's a big question, he kind of leaves a question mark hanging over that the whole time. After all, it is a damaged world. We've seen that. It's been damaged by man's wrongdoing. We only have to go to Genesis 3 for that. Well, even if there is some good stuff around, what do we do when we then give thanks? Well, his first bit of advice comes in this chapter, and it's examine yourself first before you do anything else. Chapter 5 starts with these words: guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you on earth, so let your words be few. In other words, if you're coming to worship, it's not about the trappings of worship. It's not about how the minister's dressed or some ritual. It's about listening. It's about being in relationship with God. And one of the key things we have to do is listen when we're in a relationship. Tracy and I celebrated just the other day our 31st wedding anniversary. And a lot of marriage is about listening, because marriage doesn't go very smoothly if you don't. Whereas in any relationship, Solomon says, listen. Listen first. Don't be quick to come out with dumb things. Do you know, there's very much a culture that in some churches that really is about what you do. I can remember an episode of The Simpsons. Bart and Lisa had been thoroughly embarrassed by Homer, their dad, going on about what Bart called the dinosaur bands of the 70s. Those were the ones Homer had grown up with, and embarrassing them in front of their friends. And one day on the school drive, Bart is desperately praying, Lord, if you don't let Homer embarrass us today, we'll build several churches. And Lisa immediately says, no, Bart, no, because she knows it's a very, very silly thing to say, isn't it? It may seem like a good idea to Bart at the time, but it's a silly statement, isn't it? We can think that we can somehow buy God by what we do and what we say. But actually, the first thing is listen before you do anything else. Solomon also has some advice for everyday life. If you're going to examine yourself before God, why don't you examine yourself in day-to-day circumstances? You know, one of the things that Solomon is very clear about is that good things can be corrupted. One of the things he notes, we've seen it before, is that there's injustice. And in verse 8 he says this: if you see the poor oppressed in a district and the justice and rights denied, do not be surprised at such things, for one official is eyed by a higher one, and over them both are higher ones still. The increase from the land is taken by all. The king himself profits from the fields. Solomon, I think, is, being a wise guy, he's basically looking at officialdom and kingship, and he realised even if he's a good king, there's issues. There could be corrupt officials under him. He'd perhaps do himself a favour of seeking them out, and he'd probably do his best to do that. But in the end, he realised that good things even a well-working civil service, well, it can become corrupted. What about an attitude to money? Verse 10, whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owner, except to feast his eyes on them? We always want more, don't we? I think I mentioned a week or so back that the millionaire Rockefeller was once asked, how much money do you actually need? Because he was a really, really rich guy. And he said, $1 more than I've already got. I can remember talking to the son of a deacon at my last church, and he was showing me his iPad and iPod, and he said that basically it could store more music than he could listen to in a lifetime. But he then noted that there were new ones coming out with even greater storage. My reaction was, well, if there's more music on this one than you could ever listen to in a lifetime, why would you want to get the other one? But we all know there's a market for it. People will buy it. You know, Solomon actually has a simpler take on this. Enjoy things for what they are. The sleep of a labourer is sweet, whether he eats much, little or much, but the abundance of a rich man permits him no sleep. Rockefeller, towards the end of his life, realised the toll that his riches were taking on him. He actually realised that all the wheeling and dealing and investing and trying to keep the money and increase the money was doing him no good. And in the end, he gave away a lot of his wealth and felt much better for it. You see, what we have to remember is to go back to what Solomon has said about money. Whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless. It's that word again in the Hebrew, hebel, mist. In other words, this is like running towards a mist that looks solid, but when you get there, can you actually pick anything up? Can you grasp anything in your hands? No, of course not. It's a vapour. It dissolves in sunlight. So what's the conclusion to all this? Well, first one is obvious. You can't actually take it with you. Verse 16, this too is a grievous evil. As a man comes, so he departs. And what does he gain since he toils for the wind? Picking up on that idea again. Things that seem so real now will not mean anything when we come to the end of our lives. The old phrase, and it's a good one, you can't take it with you, is so true. All that I build up in my life or try and store, I won't be able to take it with me. So what do we do in the meantime? Well, he comes back to the idea of enjoyment and the idea that things that are enjoyed are actually gifts from God. Verse 18, then I realised that it is good and proper for a man to eat and drink and to find satisfaction in his toilsome labour under the sun during the few days of his life that God has given him. For this is his lot. Moreover, when God gives any man wealth and possessions and enables him to enjoy them, to accept his lot and be happy in his work, this is a gift of God. He seldom reflects on the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with gladness of heart. Now you see, that's the thing, isn't it? That's why we are to worship God. There is satisfaction in what God has given. I kind of like the way Solomon drops that word in there, just to sort of keep a stroke of realism, to find satisfaction in his toilsome labour. Yes, it is a sin-corrupted world. It is a world that's damaged by man's rebelliousness against God. But there's still things to be enjoyed. In the end, it's coming back to a theme that's been emerging in the book. Don't become a slave to things. Enjoy things for what they are, but don't make idols of them. Jesus said this, and it's very telling. This is from Matthew's Gospel, 16, verse 24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. What good is it for a man if he gains the whole world, yet forfeits his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul?" 300 years before Jesus had said that, Alexander the Great had come out of the obscure kingdom of Macedonia and had taken on the superpower of the day, Persia. And he had conquered most of the known world at that time. His empire towards the end of his life stretched even to India, but he died about the age of 30. It went to his generals, 4 of his generals, who basically just fought over it. And that empire, which was so magnificent and amazing and a great achievement of Alexander's, was nothing within a few decades. Jesus challenges us. He really sets a challenge. What is life? What is worth living for? And actually, he says it's worth living for him. Enjoyment, as we've seen in Ecclesiastes, Solomon makes very clear, is only found in serving God. Jesus makes God known. To serve him is the most important thing. That is where we can find true satisfaction in life. Does it mean everything is easier? Does it mean everything is better? Does it mean that we never suffer? No. But it will mean that we have a security and a future. Better to give up our life, trusting in Christ, than to make idols of the things of the world. Thank you again for listening.